Now we're going to compare 3 different solo tents from Hilleberg. Hilleberg Solo, Hilleberg Akto and Hilleberg Enan. If you want complete review of this tent, then there is down in the list here and description to this video, there is links to these different reviews I made of each of these tents. If you go to Hilleberg's homepage, they also sell Hilleberg Enan as a solo tent. That tent, I have never used it by myself, so I can't say anything about that. And to be honest, I can't really see why you should have Enan when Solo exists, or actually when Hilleberg Niak exists. And Niak is a lighter tent, but that's me, and that's the reason why I haven't used Enan. Maybe I should try Enan, I don't know. If you're new to this channel, my name is Matti. I'm working as a dog musher and nature guide up in northern Sweden. I live just above Arctic Circle in a small village called Jokkmokk. Together with my partner Stina, we are self-employed and we make these guided tours, and we also make content like this. In our YouTube channel you find reviews like this, how-to films, and you also find longer videos from our longer tours and from tours we are making. So if you want to see more of this content, then you have to subscribe to the channel. If you don't want to see more of this content, then you shouldn't subscribe, of course. Hilleberg Solo, that is 2.4 kilo, and it also exists in an even more sturdy version, Hilleberg Solo Black Label, and that's 2.8 kilo. That's a heavy duty guy, not a lightweight tent. Then we have Akto. This is a very old construction that have been around for a long time. This is 1.7 kilo. And then we have a new one, Hilleberg Enan, that is 1.2 kilo. These two tents, Akto and Enan, is more similar tents, I would say. And Hilleberg Solo is a freestanding dome tent. So the weight is one of the things that separate them, and then we also have the ventilation. Hilleberg Solo have only ventilation in the top, and that's something I will come back to that, but I don't really so happy with that. These two tents, Enan and Akto, you could actually get the airflow through the whole tent. I would say they have a really good ventilation, but we're coming back to that a little bit later. In this video you will also see 2 dogs running around. One of them is Annie, one of our assistant. She's my Border Collie. She follows on different kind of tours and so on. If you follow us on Instagram, you have seen her a lot. And then we also have Johnny. He's probably back in the car. He's a little bit, yeah, he's Stina's dog. This is Johnny. Hello, Johnny. But I have a job to do, you know. I must film this. I have to record this. Yeah. Now I will pitch these 3 tents and then I will talk a little bit more about them. Hilleberg Enan, Hilleberg Akto and Hilleberg Solo. And you probably already have seen a little bit different how this tent work and how they look like. Now we're going to go through each one of them. Hilleberg Solo is a freestanding tent, and right now there is no pegs that are keeping it on place. It just loose like this. This is good if you're camping where it's rocky terrain. Then you can just walk around with the tent until you find a good spot. You pop it up and then you walk around with it. So this tent is kind of bomb proof, only how it's constructed by itself. And then you have up to 18 attach points that you can attach it to the ground. You can attach it to the snow in many different directions. It will look like a spider web more or less if you attach all this. This will stand in really heavy wind, and trust me, I have tried it and I have friends who have tried it. This tent is super good for kayakers who want to put them straight on the rock. It's also good for all of you guys who want to shopping on Black Friday, because you can put it up on the parking lot outside the shopping center, and then you're ready in the morning when they open up the gates. So this is a really good tent. The fabric in the floor. I never use any extra floor for my Hilleberg tents, and until today no floor have breaking down, not a single hole in any of my Hilleberg tents. Of course, I'm not using them more than 5, 6, 8 years before I swap them, and I have different tents, so maybe my tents are not out super much if you compare to your tent. If you have one tent that you use all the time, then you may be more heavy user than actually I am. This inner tent, it has double wall here, so you have a mosquito net, so you have a ventilation from the inner tent to the outer tent. You can close that, and that's very helpful during the winter. This is actually a 4-season tent. Here, this is like a hat. I do like this to show you. This is what I would say the weakest spot of this tent. It have only this ventilation, only this. And you don't get a good airflow through the tent. This is not enough. So this tent, when I use it, I got a lot of condensation in this tent. But, you know, if you have it open like this, what's really good is that when it's open like this, you can keep it open like this and you can cook inside even if it's raining. So that's very nice with this tent. But otherwise, the ventilation is not what I want from a good winter tent. If they have attached one ventile on each side, so you can get airflow through it, then it has been a total different level of ventilation. The walls inside the tents are quite straight if you compare to the two other tents. So this tent is very roomy if you compare to Enan and if you compare to Akto. So if you are a tall guy and you need a lot of space, this is better. So for example here, you have no problem that the roof is coming very close to your feet. And that's actually the same here, because the roof goes quite straight up here. It's maybe a little bit short because I'm 172 centimeter and I have not much space left here and not much space left there. So if I have been 2 meters, here's my assistant, look, are we going to camping? She said, hey Janni. So if I was 2 meters, I would say that 190, 2 meter, you need a longer tent. I would say that. I'm not sure. And then we had to look at the pockets. We only have these 2 small pockets, and then we have this small rope in the roof. And if you look at Big Agnes freestanding tents, you have like a small shelf hanging up here. And that's really, really nice when you want to organize things. If I look at the size of this tent, this is good for me and the dog during the summer. So I have been using this for hiking tours. Today I'm not using it anymore for hiking tours because I think it's too heavy. I've been using it for winter tours, but during the winter this is too small. Especially if you had to close up everything and you had to go in with all your gear and start undressing in here without getting snow into the tent. Then it's suddenly very, very narrow, very, very little space left. And then you maybe need a total different solution. If you want a bigger, maybe you should look at something like Namach GT tents or something like that. But it works, but it is not a lot of space. I would say it's really tiny actually. But that's the case with solo tents very often. But for summer use, it's totally okay. Hilleberg Solo, of all these 3 tents, this is the best winter tent. And when I talk about winter tent, I expect a tent that should carry heavy loads of snow, heavy loads of wet snow without collapsing. It should also be possible to attach it on the ground when it's on the snow, and then you need a lot of attach points to be able to do that. And this is a tent for the snowstorm, this is a tent for heavy snow if you compare to the other ones. But the weight of this tent, 2.4 kilo, I think that's a lot. And for the black label Solo, I don't really know why you need a black label, because this is not the black label and this is strong. This is really strong. I don't know if you really need a stronger than this one, but that's up to you. But the Black Label Solo is 2.8 kilo, and then we start talking about the really heavy tent if you compare to other tunnel tents that actually Hilleberg are producing. And now we're going to look at Hilleberg Akto. Akto was the first solo tent that Hilleberg started produce, and I don't know if it's older than the Ice Age or if it's older than Jesus Christ when he was born. I don't know. I have no idea, but this was very early on the market. And the idea with this tent is to have one bow. It's actually a tunnel tent with one bow, and Hilleberg was the first out with that idea. And then they came up with Hilleberg Enan also later on, but that's much later. I got my first Hilleberg Akto 95, 96, something like that. And then I changed it and get a newer one, of course. When you buy these products from these high-end producers, you pay for people who make these inventions. If you buy these low-budget products, you buy copies of this. I don't say that the copies are less good than this, but these companies are not producing new ideas. Hilleberg have produced a lot of new ideas, and this solo tent is one of them. I'm not 100% sure that I'm correct now, but probably I am. The first thing we're going to look at is ventilation, because I think ventilation is so important on the tent. So we start with the ventilation. The door is here, so you can open up the whole thing. Here you see, if you open the door from the above here, you actually have a ventile here. So that makes it possible to cook inside here, even if it's raining. And you can keep it open like this, and then the pasta steam goes out here, or whatever you are cooking. It's also possible to attach an extra string here if you want to keep it out when it's heavy wind. If you use this in heavy wind, you should not have the wind coming in that direction. You should have the wind coming from the back. That's the same with the Hilleberg Solo, of course. But this is only one of the small ventiles. Now we're going to look at the good thing with this. On each side of this tent, you have these ventiles. And it's possible to close it, and it's possible to keep it open. This black fabric here lets some air going through it, so you're not closing it totally. If you have snow drift, for example, then you still have ventilation, but not as good as if you have it open. But if you have it open in snowstorm, the tent will fill up with drifting snow because the ventile is so low. But with this ventile, one of these on each side, and with this small cover, even if it's raining, and if you have a weak wind, then you get the airflow through the whole tent. The wind comes like this and going through, and that takes away a lot of the condensation from the tent. It dries out the tent. So because of this, you get much less condensation in this tent. And this is a little bit similar idea with Hilleberg Enan. I will look at that later on. Because of this construction with these ropes here, this tent is a little bit more tricky to pitch. And you can go to the review of this tent, and then you can see a little bit more how you pitch it. But if you get this one, you must be more careful how to make the fabric more tight. If you're thinking about using this tent during the winter, I would say this is not a good winter tent, because when it's snowing, a lot of heavy wet snow, the snow will landing here, and it will be like it will stay here. It will not go away. So this collects snow. I have tried it in snowstorm. And as long as it's blowing and the snow is drifting, you have more problem that it building up around it. But that's with all tents. But if it's just wet snow that coming straight down, this is not good. This will be a problem. So it's not a good winter tent for the area where I'm working, or in an area where you have a lot of snowfall. The construction itself of this tent is actually good, otherwise it's strong. I have tested it in very heavy wind and it stands. There is an issue if you get the wind in the side here, that the flyer will lay attached to the inner tent, and that's not really what I like. But otherwise this tent is really good. Also here you have a door where you can close the inner tent totally. You will see different when we come to Enan. So this is why it's a 4-season tent. You can close it even if you have snowdrift. The snowdrift will not come into the inner tent. If we look here inside the tent, I would say that if we look here inside this tent, I would say that you have much more room up here and down here than if you compare with Hilleberg Solo. It's longer, but then you have another issue. As you see, this distance is not so long. And now I'm straight on the floor. Imagine if I have a 5 centimeter isomat and on top of that a bulky sleeping bag. Then I need more space here. And then I reach the out flyer actually. So the space itself is the length is good, but it's quite low here actually. And Hilleberg here is the same. One small pocket here, and they could have put more pockets in this because I like pockets. And it's the same issue with this tent as with Hilleberg Solo. If you're going to use it during the winter, it will be narrow. When you close the tent and you want to go inside and take off your bulky winter dress, then this will be very not very much space, you know. This is hard for me to say because this tent have been the best solo camping tent I ever had for many years. I really loved Hilleberg Akto and they have been super good. But today it's 2023. This tent 1.7 kilo, come on. It is heavy if you compare to other tents. So I really don't know when you need an Akto, to be honest. I can understand that you need a Solo, 2.4 kilo, but 1.7 kilo an Akto, when you actually can get a Hilleberg Enan that have the same weight, and then you get a 2-person tent with a vestibule. And I don't know. So let's continue to next one, Hilleberg Enan. So finally we've reached my Hilleberg Solo summer favorite tent, Hilleberg Enan, and I'm going to show you why. We do the same as with Akto. We start with ventilation. Here you see you have really big, good ventiles here. One bad thing is that they are not really protected from rain, but it is a mosquito net here. So even if it's open, it's not raining straight through it. And the distance between this net and the inner tent is bigger on this tent than on Akto. So I would say that I have never had a problem that it's raining into it. And you have still a thing here that you can close it if it's very bad. So it is no wind protection here or roof here, but it's not a really bad problem. This tent needs 6 pegs and for standing, and you only have one here that keep this up, and it's a little bit easier to pitch than Hilleberg Akto, but Hilleberg Akto is standing better. You have more sticks in the ground if something happens. But here you have small loops on each side, and if you want it really good in storm, you should attach small ropes here. And what I do is that I have small ropes that are free, so I can, when I need it, I can attach. Because if you put a rope here, then you also get less problem with that the wind put the outer flyer into the inner tent. And that's actually something I learned from you guys, because there was some of you who told me that when I made the review of this tent. You find the review, a link down in the description of this video. So now we continue. Here we got the door, and as you see, you don't have the cap here as you have on Hilleberg Akto. So this tent, you can't really keep a ventile open when you're cooking inside. Even if you open the door, you don't have, so you can open much. You can open here, but it would not really be open. So it's a little bit more difficult to cook in this if you don't have the airflow through it. But you have these two ventiles, one on each side, so you get a very good airflow through the whole tent. Here you see one thing that's actually a little bit different from the other two tents. You see the inner tent here? It has only the mosquito net. You can't close it. So if you have snowstorm and it's drifting in snow under the fabric, this is a problem. This is a 3-season tent. This is not a snowstorm tent. The size of this tent is more or less similar to the other two. You have some pockets there, but why no pockets? I still want more pockets. Hilleberg Enan, this comes at 1.2 kilo. And if you compare with Hilleberg Akto, that comes in 1.7 kilo, this is 500 gram lighter. You can compare this tent with other ultralight tents, like Big Agnes, or I don't know all the name, MSR and so on. The difference between many of these tents and this one is that this is 1.2 kilo. Nothing more. If you buy, for example, the Big Agnes, you can find a review of Big Agnes Copper Spur Solo Tent in this channel. I'll leave a link in the description. Then you had to add extra floor, and it's not the weight, trail weight they have given you. It's without the bags, it's without all that stuff that you need. This is the tent with a good floor. You don't need an extra floor. It is actually with the spare part for repairing the pole here, and it with all pegs, with all the bags, everything, 1.2 kilo. So it is a light tent, but it's easy to be fooled when you're looking at the description of the other tents. And some of the solo tents, the real ultralight tents, you need 2 trekking poles. And maybe if you are out canoeing or if you pack rafting, you don't have these trekking poles, and then you need to carry extra trekking poles. This tent is really good if you go canoeing or whatever when you don't have trekking poles with you. So this is the honest 1.2 kilo, I would say. Now we look at inside the tent, and this is also a little bit interesting, because now I put my foot all the way down to the end, as you see. And because these have one point down here, it is higher. But if I just come up a little bit, I get the feeling that this tent has much more room here than if you compare with Hilleberg Akto, for example. And then we see how long it is. When I'm laying down here, I still have a lot of space up here to here. This tent would work for longer persons. The height is different a little bit. You had to go in, if you want to look at Hilleberg's height, you had to look. You see, I reached the top here with my head almost if I was sitting straight. But for me, it's no problem to sit in this tent cooking and doing things like that. They have some different size. One have a little bit wider inner tent and a little bit smaller vestibule. Like this Enan, I think, have the smallest inner tent, but they have the widest spot here. If you compare with Solo, they have a little bit wider inner tent, but less space in the outer tent. So that's details. and I can't say that that makes a big difference. All of these 3 tents works fine for me when I go camping with the dog. And now actually you see Annie came in here. She's less than 20 kilo. She's maybe 15 kilo dog, and I'm laying here and she's laying there. So it works fine for 1 person and the dog. I could actually be in this tent 1 person and 2 dogs during the summer tours. So then we try to make a conclusion. Hilleberg Solo, freestanding, heaviest tent. This is the only tent I would recommend you of these 3 if you're going up in the mountain during the winter. This is the only freestanding tent. It's good for camping on rocks and terrain like that where you can't put pegs all over. But it is heavy. Winter tent. Hilleberg Akto, 1.7 kilo. I don't really know when you should need that. It's good with extra ventilation. It's maybe a good Solo tent if you need something a little bit sturdy and you not carry so much, because if you want to carry it, I would directly recommend you Hilleberg Enan. But if you want one all-around year tent and you are a lot in the forest area, canoeing or something like that, maybe Akto. But why not the Enan? Because Enan is 1.2 kilo and that's actually okay to have in the backpack. That is a lightweight tent. It's not ultra lightweight, but it's a lightweight tent. And that can take, I would say that Enan can take as much wind as Akto can take, probably, more or less. If you are in a windy area and really want wind, then go for Solo, of course. But Enan works in the Scandinavian mountains, and all these 3 tents, you pitch them at the same time. You don't fippling around with first the inner tent and then the flyer. And it's difficult when you choose tent, and it's difficult to recommend different kind of tents like this. But this is how I'm thinking about them, and this is my personal ideas about these tents. And I have used all of them in very different variation. I have never used Enan during the winter, but the both other ones I've used in quite heavy exposed winter terrain up in the mountains. And you will see that in the review of each tent. If you want to know more details about the tents, I'm not so much into specs about how strong the fabric and all that things. Then you have to go to Hilleberg website, because they also change it sometimes. If you want to know more about my opinion on each tent and more detailed review, then you head over to the reviews of each tent down in the description under here. I want to say thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting us with super thanks and all. Thank you for supporting us on Patreon. And if you like this content and want to see more of videos from us, subscribe, give thumbs up, and you know, all that things. See you in next video. Ciao.